I think we are live. So, hello, good morning, afternoon, evening to people watching us around the world. My name is Adriano Bossoni. I am Director of Analysis at RAIN, and I am joined today by my colleague Matteo Ilardo, who is our Europe analyst. And today we will be talking about the very, very hectic week, month, year that the United Kingdom is having. Man, what a crazy evolution of events. We started the week with a prime minister. We ended the week with a caretaker, I guess, prime minister, and a fast track push to appoint a new leader. So, Matteo, just for people watching us here, what brought us to this situation? How did we end up here?
Well, we could look back. First of all, hello, Adriano. Hello, everyone connected. But first of all, I would say we could even dig back as far as 2016 from Brexit. But looking a bit closer to us, with Truss was elected prime minister only 45 days before actually being resigning as the new prime minister. She, of course, was replacing Boris Johnson, former prime minister, and as leader of the Conservative Party. And she was campaigning against Truss Sunak, who used to be chancellor under Johnson's government, and she campaigned very much on promises of cutting taxes and deregulating the UK economy and trying to kickstart economic growth that has been stalling for a few years now. She delivered those very promises as soon as she took office, and that's exactly the reason why, in the end, she ended up having to resign a bit more than a month later. On 23 of September, her former chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, announced a 45 billion package of tax cuts that was completely unfunded, or better, to be funded by debt, right, as borrowing costs are rising in the world and in the UK as well. And that caused market turmoil that sent the British pound to historic lows against the dollars, sent government bond yields to historic highs, and threatened to destabilize the UK financial system. The central bank had to step in with bond purchasing. So after a week of turmoil, Kwarteng had to go. Truss sacked him last week on Friday. And then she had to follow shortly after we saw chaotic scenes during a vote called by Labour on a fracking ban on Wednesday, the day before she had to resign. And that was just the beginning of her inevitable demise that we saw happening as soon as she had to reverse the fiscal plan.
And it's funny if you think about it, because people often accuse politicians of saying one thing during the campaign and then doing a different thing once they are in office. But in this case, she actually did exactly what she had promised to do during the leadership campaign of the Conservative Party. The thing is, it was too much for financial markets, this idea of cutting taxes left and right with no really replacement for those funds that would be missing, proved to be like too much. And as you said, the pound dropped to almost parity with the US dollar. Government bond yields went up. There was a lot of mistrust in just how sustainable the policies would be, even though she promised, and I guess from an ideological point of view, right, that over time these widespread tax cuts would generate so much economic growth that the fact that there was not really money to pay for that policy was beside the point, right? It was irrelevant because this would generate so much growth that it would be irrelevant whether or not the tax cuts were funded. But what I find fascinating, other than the role of financial markets in precipitating political events, right? Because she was, to some extent, I'm going to exaggerate here, but bear with me, to some extent, she was sacked by the so-called bond vigilantes, right? The financial markets really showing that they didn't trust the policies. But then the other aspect that I find personally very interesting is just how ruthless British politics are. One day you are on top of the world, one day you are a very popular figure within your party. And let's keep in mind that Truss actually won a party contest. People in the party actually voted for her. And the next day, if opinion polls are not positive, if financial markets do not like your policies, you are suddenly radioactive and you are out of office within a week. It's amazing
Yeah.
just how quickly things evolved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what to add to this, just that, as you said, UK politics have proven in the past several times particularly ruthless. But this is what happens when you have the populism that follows years of making promises on Brexit, and Brexit basically affecting politics at every level in the United Kingdom. And then you have these clashing with clear economic realities, uh, external pressures that are now dictating policy actions in the UK. And you still have a parliament that is very much had been elected very much on the Brexit, on the promise of delivering Brexit. Is still a Brexit majority within the Conservative Party. So we have this inherent tension between what the party would have actually want to deliver politically and what they can actually deliver. You're absolutely right. We can't really blame her for not keeping her promises. She did. And her main adversary during the campaign, Rishi Sunak, former Chancellor former Finance Minister, therefore, of the UK, had actually been very prophetic in predicting what all these promises would have cost in case she was elected, and that's exactly what happened. She caused financial turmoil that then eventually meant she had to take a step back. So,
speaking of Sunak, it's good that you mentioned him
yes.
because now that she has announced her resignation, there's going to be a leadership contest. Leadership hopefuls, people who want to replace a Truss, have until Monday to present their candidacies. Then it will be put to a vote among Conservative members of the UK Parliament. And if there are two or more candidates getting over 100 votes in the Parliament, it will be put to an online vote by Conservative members. The idea of holding a virtual, I guess, an online vote is to fast track the process. The last time it was put to a postal vote and it took 2 months. Now they want to get it over with within a week. So according to polls and according to people who are like betting on the winner, the main candidates are Sunak, the former chancellor, who campaigned during the previous leadership contest on a promise of like fiscal moderation. We can't really cut taxes at a time when we are increasing public spending to deal with the energy crisis. We have an inflation problem, so this is not the right time to do crazy things with the economy. But if pollsters are correct, the other candidate is former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who left office like 2.5 months ago. So it's crazy how things are evolving. What do you think will happen?
Looks so far away, right, Boris Johnson? And yeah, as you said, just 2.5 months ago. Well, I think, as you said, if we looked at what was happening within Truss government, well, she was not in power anymore, I would argue, but still in office. We could have noticed a sort of centrist wave from within the Conservative Party slowly taking over. First of all, in the person of Jeremy Hunt, current Chancellor and current Finance Minister in the UK, who had reversed most, if not all, Truss promises and had basically been operating for the past week as the de facto Prime Minister. And then eventually, when the Home Secretary resigned, and which was a major step into the crisis that led to Truss' resignation, Braverman, she was substituted by another centrist figure who had backed Sunak previously during the campaign. But then again, this is something that, should the vote go to the grassroots of the Conservative Party, probably these would not necessarily continue go this way. Boris Johnson is very popular within the Brexiteers of the Conservative Party, and also in Parliament, but also at the grassroots level, those who elected Truss in the first place. So we may actually end up in a situation in which Johnson effectively makes it back, in which case, most likely everything that has been done so far to calm financial markets and to try and reestablish positive relations with international partners, especially the European Union, then it would take a significant blow and we'd have to start all over again.
It's funny that you should mention the European Union, because right before the political scandal, the political turmoil began last week, there were increasing signs of a rapprochement between the now, I guess, outgoing Prime Minister Truss's administration and the European Union. There were some signals that there could reach an agreement on issues like customs controls in Northern Ireland, which are still a big obstacle to the relationship. Apparently, there were compromises to be made. Apparently, there was a deal in the making. I don't know what to think of this, but I don't think that this leadership contest necessarily derails the negotiations, especially if they result in Sunak winning the contest. But they will delay, that's for sure. They will certainly delay the negotiations between the UK and the EU. The UK is so internally focused these days that I don't think there will be negotiations with the EU for a while. I don't know if you agree with this.
Absolutely. And I think that this is not even of that much secondary importance, because some decisions should be taken sooner than later. We know that in Northern Ireland, sorry, we have elections eventually scheduled for the end of October. There's a deadline after which, if a government isn't formed with the current majorities in the regional parliament, then supposedly new elections will have to be taken. That's not a hard deadline, in a sense that still can happen, and it wouldn't necessarily derail negotiations between the UK and the EU, but definitely it was a preferred outcome of negotiation if a solution was found indeed before that deadline. I don't think that's going to be met anymore. But in general, yes, I agree with you. There's a delay now because of the current government crisis in Westminster, but definitely negotiations, in my opinion, are not endangered, in a sense that the rapprochement between the two sides happened despite Truss. Truss did not campaign on warming ties with Brussels. On the contrary, Truss had been extremely hawkish during her time as Foreign Secretary under Johnson. And then a rapprochement happened nonetheless, because with the current immense external economic pressures that are narrowing policy options for the UK, having a trade war with the EU would be a complete disaster. It would not allow the UK to try and mend mistakes in economic policies within its own economy. So if you have a war against your major trading partner, the EU, then it would definitely worsen things, and it would make it impossible for anyone as the new prime minister to actually trying and fix the situation.
One final topic that I would like to cover. We are kind of running out of time, but I think we have time to briefly touch on an additional issue. It's funny, in European media and in British media in recent days, there has been a lot of comparison between the UK and Italy, in the sense that Italy is the kind of country one tends to think when it comes to a very high turnover of prime ministers, governments collapsing and being formed every other week. So the comparison has been very, very interesting in recent weeks, because the UK is not a country that comes to mind when you think about governments collapsing so quickly. But I think that there's another comparison to be made, which I think is even more interesting. Italy is about to appoint a right-wing government in which some of the members of the coalition have campaigned on promises that are not so different from the policies that Liz Truss tried to implement in the UK. We have promises of cutting taxes, forgiving previous debts to the state, even introducing the so-called flat tax as opposed to the progressive taxing system that Italy currently has. So these ideas are not so different from what Truss has been trying unsuccessfully to do. Do you think this is a cautionary tale for the upcoming Italian government? Do you think that people in Rome are actually keeping a very close eye on events in London?
I think so, and I think that, to be honest, people in London should have kept a closer eye to things in Rome, because Italy has been dealing with this sort of situation for a few years already. And yeah, I mean, we all saw the Economist's front page brutally. I'm not sure how to feel about it as an Italian living in the UK, but I do like this crossover. I think it's an interesting comparison. We see the UK now looking not exactly like Italy today, because Italy, and that's perhaps counterintuitive, has been actually, if you take away from the equation interest payment on its huge public debt, Italy has been running on a budget surplus for the past 2 decades. So what the UK looks like with its high public spending, tax cuts, and slow growth is actually Italy in the 80s. So if the UK doesn't change course and wants to have a glimpse of the future, Italy now could actually look like what the UK will have to do in terms of economic policy. Of course, the two countries are completely different. The economic basis, the UK also has its own central bank and currency. But what I'm saying is that in Italy, a lot of the policy, the set of policy options for every government are very much restricted by markets, external forces, and seeking international credibility is always a driving force for Italian politics, and that is becoming the similar case for the UK as well, and maybe more so in the future.
So basically, what you're saying is that despite the campaign promises, the new Italian government's fiscal policies may not be as radical as they promised during the campaign, because they don't want to go through the same experience that the UK government has just gone through.
Basically, yeah, from an Italian perspective, they will try to deliver on some promises, tax cuts, and perhaps increasing spending on some of the things they promised they would increase spending on, but they will have to do so till a certain extent, and they will probably have to cut back on many other things, and trying to not to stray too far away from what their predecessor Mario Draghi had put on course in terms of fiscal prudence and economic reform.
Okay, Matteo, I'm afraid this is all we have time for today. As always, it's a pleasure talking with you. And yeah,
pleasure
if
all mine.
like what they heard and saw today, you can learn about Rain's geopolitical intelligence offers at rainnetwork.com. You can find Matteo's works and many other analysts' work there. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have everyone watching us have a great weekend.
Bye.